I feel that glorious is apropos for KC Joyner as we are past the quarter pole into what is becoming a fun NFL season here. The NFC's got a lot of interesting storylines. The Eagles and Cardinals. Let's dive into it now with ESPN.com NFL Insider KC Joyner here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. I feel like that will be your new intro song there. Glorious.
I'm glad most stations play She Blinded Me with Science. I like the change-up.
That reference, obviously, to Casey's moniker, the football scientist. Let's dive into this matchup here. First off, if Wendell Smallwood doesn't play, which looks very likely at this point, he's a game-time decision, he's kind of in that Sproles role. How do you think that affects this Eagles offense?
I still think Clement can play that role fairly well, so I'm not too concerned about having a back for the role. My bigger concern would be how the matchup for Philadelphia's front offensive line and their blockers versus the Arizona front seven, because I do these grades for an ESPN article I read every week regarding blocking matchups. It's done from a fantasy perspective, but you can look at it from an NFL perspective as well. Philadelphia in the rushing game, I grade them as having a B- grade this year, and I've got Arizona's front seven ranking as an A-. So we talked about the Chargers game saying, hey, it's a great matchup for Philadelphia to be running a football. This might be a week to pass the ball.
If they do pass the ball, they're up against Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, this is a pretty good secondary branch is good against the tight ends here. How do you like this matchup, Jeffrey, Smith, Aguilar, Ertz against this Cardinals secondary?
I like it better than most. I mean, you don't want to throw at Peterson, but look, if they have Peterson shadow Jeffrey, really, I don't think Jeffrey's the type of player that a defense should shadow. Let's take nothing away from him, but he's not a Julio Jones. He's not an Antonio Brown. He's not that type of player. So I have a feeling the Cardinals might not shadow, and if they don't, then that means you can move people around, and then you might be able to get Jeffrey up against Justin Bethel or even Torrey Smith as the lineup matchup would say. The matchup against Bethel, he's not a very good cornerback. So yeah, they've got Peterson there, but they're going to have to give Bethel some help because I've got Bethel as one of the green-rated cornerbacks, which means he's a guy you can throw against.
All right, and if they can throw against him, that'll be Carson Wentz, and obviously going up against the Cardinals, they've lost their best pass rusher with Marcus Golden out for the season. What is their pass rush like overall matched up against this Eagles offensive line? Should Carson Wentz have time to find guys open?
Well, their pass rush, I graded their front seven as having a C- grade right now. They're not doing fairly well. The Cardinals aren't, and that was before the loss. Now, I've got Philadelphia rated as a C in pass blocking. I think that Philadelphia can do a better job than that in pass blocking. I think that they've got the talent. They're capable of playing better than that. So I think when you add the loss together versus, the loss of Golden versus what Philadelphia's capable of, I don't know that this will be a mismatch. But again, this is the way I would think to go, to say, hey, we know we can block these guys from pass blocking perspective, but I'm not so sure we can do it against the run.
KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider with us here, looking at the matchups to watch. How about Eagles, Philadelphia running the football? They've done it 80 times over the last 2 weeks for about 400 yards. Are yards on the ground going to be tough to come by, though, against Arizona?
Yeah, I think they are, and it's going to have to be one of those change of paces, too. I think it's going to be a situation. You don't want to lean on Wentz too much. We've seen what happens if you're trying to have him throw 40 passes. It usually doesn't turn out well. But I just think they can't go into just a one-dimensional mode. They're still going to be able to do certain things on the ground and such, and I think you can, again, if you make their pass rush, if you make them start worrying about doing things with their pass rush, then I think you can start. Well, I think that's maybe the way they need to approach this, to say we need our run game to wear down their pass rush. That's kind of how you need to think about it, because they're already down a player, and then you can start wearing them down and start doing things more through the air. So I think that's how they need to approach that.
I think one thing is interesting, too, is LeGarrette Blount the last couple of weeks. He hasn't been on the field as much as you would think. Even though he's had the yards and he had the big yardage output last week, he got out-snapped by Smallwood almost 2-1, and you wonder if they had to lean on LeGarrette Blount for, say, 20, 25 carries, can he be as effective if he's used in that role still at he's 30 years old? People wondering, is he going to wear down? Do you see that from LeGarrette Blount?
Nah, I would use him for a two-down back and then short yardage goal line. I would restrict him strictly to those things. And I would try and put him in there in times when you're trying to do play actions. You can't be too obvious about it, but I would put him in those situations there to say, okay, we want them to be thinking we're going to be doing this. I don't want to say necessarily decoy, but you don't want to wear him. This is not a game where you want to try and wear him out, because, again, you're just going to be going, Philadelphia's run blocking is strong, but the front seven is stronger, so you're going strength against strength. And so I'm if I'm them, I'm using him as change of pace. And again, I've got a lot of faith in Corey Clement. I think he can do a very good job. And if you only need him to do it for one game, 15 touches, I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, that's something that it seems that Casey, they're giving him, they're gaining more and more confidence, giving him more and more carries. 3rd down and 1, convert. 3rd down and 2, convert. What kind of guy was he in college, and has he kind of become that guy in the pro game?
Yeah, short area burst guy in college. He's not. I don't think he's really a breakaway threat. They've given him 16 carries the past 2 weeks. So I think they realize that once older, you can't wear him down with a bunch of carries. And I think they realize Smallwood is just not a guy. Also, I think if you're looking at 500 carries between everybody, I don't think they want to give them all to lean on a bell cow. And I don't think they want to go straight committee. I don't think ideally they'd like to go that far. But I think if they were saying ideally they'd like to go maybe 200, 250 for Blunt, maybe mark 225, and then split the other 250 between the other two, probably like 150 for Smallwood and 100 for Clement.
All right, let's look at some of the injury situations for Philly on defense. Fletcher Cox ruled out with the calf injury, will not play against the Cardinals. Cardinals don't run the ball a lick, though, so how big of a loss is Fletcher Cox in this particular game?
It's one of the biggest mismatches is the Arizona run blocking versus the Philadelphia front seven. Arizona grades that as a D-, and they're close to being worst in that category. And Philadelphia's front seven grades that as a B-. I'm surprised they actually didn't grade that a little bit better than that. But when I'm looking at the grade differentials between the two, it's just one of the biggest mismatches of the week. In fact, from their perspective, Arizona, if you grade their offense versus the Philadelphia front seven based on this category they've got one of the worst differential grades there is. So I think that Arizona is they're going to have to be make this a passing game. So that's another reason that Philadelphia may need to pass the ball, because if Arizona's passing the ball and starts to turn it into a shootout, you can't slow it down.
Yeah, and Fletcher Cox being out last week, they got through that game without him. They also got through without Ronald Darby. He obviously won't play again this week. But this Eagles secondary, you got speed from Arizona. You've got Larry Fitzgerald, who's still churning out catches and yards. Is this an area of concern?
This is where Philadelphia, where Arizona's pass blocking also, they happen to grade it as a D- in pass blocking this week. So the differential is not nearly as good for Philadelphia, but this is where I think they need to lean on making some big plays in the pass rush and things. Because, yeah, you're talking, you've got Brown, you've got Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald's now a possession receiver. He can still have an impact on some downfield plays, but he's really more of a possession receiver. So I wouldn't be thinking of him being the guy, but he can do so much damage. He's such a good possession receiver. He could do so much damage. So if I'm Philadelphia, I'm thinking about, you've got three different guys who will be able to go deep. So I'm looking for big plays to stop that. Sacks, and you've got, of course, Carson Palmer and interceptions, because he's a risk taker.
All right. When you watch these two teams and you're looking at the Eagles' defense, where's a spot that you think that they can dominate the Cardinals' offense and give them some problems?
Yeah, I think, again, I mentioned pass blocking. I think that Arizona's pass blocking is atrocious, and Philadelphia has not been blitzing that much this year. If I'm looking for one tactic I'd like to see them do a little bit more, they have not been blitzing that often, or it hasn't been as consistent as it has in the past. If I'm them, this is a game I want to do that, because Carson Palmer, he'll take risk if you just give him regular looks and coverage, and if you get a pass rush in his face, though, he will now get rid of the ball and throw it into coverage way more frequently than he should, than anybody should. So if I'm them, I want to see them maybe, I don't want to say throw the kitchen sink at him, but I want to see a lot of blitzes this week and see if Palmer can stand up to it, because I'm thinking he can.
Yeah, and if you flip it over for Philly on offense, if you're Doug Peterson, you've run the ball 80 times with a lot of success. This Cardinals team, pretty stout against the run. What's your game plan? Where on the Arizona defense? We talked about Peterson. They're pretty good there. Mathal, very good in that spot. Branch has been good against the tight ends. They're pretty good against the run. So what's your game plan against this Arizona defense?
Yeah, I'm still thinking that they need to be able to highlight the tight end this week. I think Branch is good. I don't think he's quite shut down. I've only got them graded as a yellow grade against tight ends, which means it's a middle tier matchup. So I'd like to see him do that. I'd like to see Philadelphia. I trust the offensive line to do some things, but I don't want to see them running the ball. I don't want to see them running slants and ISOs, things of that nature. I don't want to see them running standard running plays, but I'd like to see them say, okay, we're going to try and do some things with the screen passes. Maybe turn 5 running plays, 10 running plays into screen passes this week, to convert some of those over, because Wentz has shown that he's very good at that, and I'd really like to mix things up with them that way to make them think, okay, now we've got to be thinking about all these, because I think if they can hit some success there, turn some of those runs into pass runs, as it were, then they'll open up some lanes to do other things.
What's your thoughts on a guy like Ellington in this game? I thought he had 14 targets last week out of the backfield, and when I see a running back like that, I go back to that Eagle game last year against Detroit where they burned them a couple of times. I think, they scored 2 touchdowns throwing the ball out of the backfield. And if I'm Arizona, I'm watching that tape with a guy like Ellington and trying to get him involved, because with David Johnson out, their running game has been bupkis. And one thing Johnson does is catch the ball. They use him almost like a wideout, but Ellington can fill that role. They just haven't gone to him a lot in that role.
Yeah, I'm a lot more worried about Ellington, and I would like to see them say we're going to take Ellington out of the game. We're just not going to let you do that, because if they can if they say, okay, you're not going to be able to throw the ball out until you're going to be able to run it with him. I don't think Arizona wants to run it with him. I think they want to use him as a pass catching back. And if I'm them, I also want to invite them to run. By the way, because Chris Johnson, I don't know where he ranks this week. I remember last week though, I looked at the metrics, and he had the lowest yards per carry going into week 4 of any back with 20 or more carries. I mean, he's just doing a terrible job. They're giving him bad blocking, but he's also not doing anything with it. So if I'm Philadelphia, I'm begging Arizona to run. Please run the ball. Please hand it off to Chris Johnson as much as you want.
How do you do that? Do you put an airplane with one of those advertisement banners on it?
I put my safeties really deep and say, fine, if the box is open, you can put a hat in the hat and see if you can do it, because I don't think they can.
Well, one thing that, watching Arizona, you've probably watched them on tape and studied them a lot more. I've seen them play, in the primetime game against Dallas here and there on the Red Zone channel and stuff. But, man, against Dallas that night, the pressure was unbearable for Palmer, who doesn't move all that well. But it looks like their offense is so one-dimensional. Shotgun, chuck it down the field, just launching it down the field, right? I mean, is that the MO of Bruce Arians' offense right now?
Bruce Arians and Carson Palmer, you make that combination. Carson Palmer's always been a risk-taking gunslinger, who's going to throw the ball deep. That was a great fit when he was younger and things, but that's what they want to do. But I don't think he's not as accurate as he used to be. He does feel the pass rush a whole lot more. And by the way, the thing with their offensive line, a lot of offensive lines early in the season, like Dallas' offensive line first couple games, they really didn't play that well. In the last couple games, you can see them starting to gel, and they're playing better. And a lot of offensive lines, it's just a matter of we need to get playing time together. Arizona, they don't have the talent. That's their problem. They don't have the talent. They can gel all they want, and they're a C-graded offensive line. And right now, they're not gelling, and they don't have the talent. So if I'm Philadelphia, again, that's where I think the biggest mismatch could be, is to just challenge their offensive line and get after Palmer, because if they want to hit those big plays, they're probably going to hit a couple, but if he throws a couple of picks and Wentz doesn't, the Eagles win the game.
KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN with the matchups to watch and how this game will kind of go. One area, the offensive line is big. We know that the Eagles' offensive line has been one of the better ones in football. So when you look at this Eagles offensive line and how this game might end up going, how much of a key do you think that matchup is, their offensive line against the 3-4 front of Arizona?
Yeah, I'd really love to see the offensive line early on and say let's start to take some vertical chances early on, because I think as much of a risk taker as Arizona is, can you imagine if Carson Palmer's down 14-0 in, say, early second quarter, and now he's really got to start forcing passes? I think if you're Philadelphia, it gives you that sort of, reminds me of something that Buddy Ryan used to say. He'd love it if his team got up 10-0. He said once we got up 10-0, he said, I'm just going to throw the kitchen sink at the other quarterback, because I know if I can get him to make a mistake and get us up 17-0, the game's over. So I don't think you can necessarily say it for the Eagles defense, but if they can get a lead and then really start to put pressure on that Cardinals offensive line, I just think it could be like the second half of the Cowboys game where you just saw the Cowboys kind of dominate that thing after the Cardinals got ahead. But I think if the Eagles can flip that over,
and that's with two starters for Arizona on the offense. They're down 2 starters in this game.
Yep, exactly. So, like I said, if I'm them, to me, that's the key for both teams. If Philadelphia can take advantage of it and Arizona can't, I don't think they have the talent. I really think I can't call them the worst offense. But actually, right now, I might call them the worst offensive line, except maybe them or Miami, because Seattle's actually played better the past couple weeks. But Arizona, right now, their offensive line might be playing as bad as any offensive line in the league.
KC Joyner is with us here, and you can follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS. Let's take a look at the schedule this week, Casey, and get your couple quick quips on some of these games of note. Let's start Carolina and Detroit. Both teams have only given up 70 points this season, so defensively they're both pretty good. But what's the difference in this one?
Mismatch in the running game. Carolina ranks third in good blocking rate, which means they're the third best run blocking team on a percentage perspective. Detroit is 29th. They're third from the bottom in that category. So I think Carolina's going to be able to run the ball all day.
Tennessee, bad performance. They gave up 57 last. This one's interesting. They gave up 57. Miami didn't score. What gives?
What gives is Miami ranks dead last in good blocking rate. Their offense does. They're at 23%. No other team is below 30%. The Dolphins have maybe the worst offensive line, and Tennessee's defense is a lot better than they showed last week, so I think that's going to show up today.
Buffalo went on the road last week and beat Atlanta. Should we think that they can go to Cincinnati and get a road victory here too?
Cincinnati their offense has turned the corner ever since they changed offensive coordinators. They've got playmaker Mixon. They're hitting big plays in the passing game, even without Eifert out there. I don't think Buffalo has the firepower.
Can the Jets win 3 in a row? They're in Cleveland.
They can. Cleveland. You look at Cleveland's the Jets' offensive line is blocking pretty well. The Cleveland's defense is not Cleveland's pass defense is not that good. That's going to be the key. Can the Jets run the ball versus the Cleveland rush defense, which is probably the only bright spot in their team.
San Francisco plays hard. The Colts are abysmal, but they are at home. Brissett's been playing okay. Can the Colts pull out a victory at home?
I think this is going to be one of those games where Kyle Shanahan's the best play caller in the NFL. He's the most creative play caller, and you give him a good matchup, and he's going to be able to do something with it. This is the kind of matchup that I think Shanahan's play calling is going to come up. So I think San Francisco win that game on the road.
How about this one? L.A. against New York. You got the two biggest markets, but they got the biggest problem. They don't have any victories. Neither one of them yet. Whose O goes?
Yeah, I think the Giants have been playing better, and the Chargers, they're not. We saw that they can't stop the run very well. They're not run blocking that well, and I think Gordon's a little bit banged up. So I think the Giants are going to have more firepower.
Jacksonville lost to the Jets last week after scoring 44 the week before against the Ravens, who the Pittsburgh Steelers beat. They're going to Pittsburgh. Any shot for Bortles and company?
I'll give you an interesting metric here real quick. The Jaguars loaded the defensive box, meaning they put an extra defender in the box. On 18 of the Jets' rushing plays, the Jets averaged 8.6 yards per carry against the loaded box. The Jaguars have the worst rush defense maybe in the NFL, and the Steelers are just going to pound the ball at them all day long.
Baltimore struggled on offense. They're struggling on defense, too, by the way. Oakland, could Carr possibly play? He did practice on Friday, and they've been struggling. Both teams have lost 2 in a row. What gives on Sunday between Baltimore and Oakland?
Yeah, Baltimore's going to try and he can take advantage of Oakland's terrible rush defense. Yeah, I mean, I think that Oakland still has more talent than Baltimore's going across the country. I just don't think Baltimore has enough explosiveness on offense, and I think that Oakland still retains some of that even if you got Manuel in the center.
I like this game, Seattle and L.A. L.A. has given the Seahawks problems even when they've been dreadful. They beat them last year 9-3, but now they can score. The game's at the Coliseum. Are the Rams for real today this week?
They are, and the Rams, by the way, they lead the league in good blocking rate, and you can make the case that they have the best offensive line of the league, better than Tennessee, better than Dallas, better than Pittsburgh. They're playing that well right now. Seattle's front seven's not capable of stopping that. I think LA wins that one.
Wow, Dallas at home. They lost to the Rams last week there. They don't have a huge home field advantage. Green Bay traveling. A lot of people think this one, could be a playoff preview, but Dallas could lose 2 in a row at home. Does Aaron Rodgers have enough to knock off the boys in Big D?
They've got some problems in their running game. Green Bay does. They're not run blocking particularly well, and they've got Ty Montgomery's injury. Don't know if he's going to be full to go. Dallas's offensive line is finally starting to look like they did last year, so I think that's going to be the difference.
All right, Houston put up 57 behind the rookie Deshaun Watson, who will get the start in prime time against the undefeated Chiefs. Is this the week someone slows down Kareem Hunt? That's a great Texans defense.
The Chiefs are the only team in the league to average double-digit yardage total and good blocking yards per attempt, meaning when you give their ball carriers good blocking, they're gaining 11.2 yards per carry. Houston, I don't think their defense is going to be able to slow that down, so I'll take the Chiefs in that one.
All right, Monday night, we've got the Minnesota Vikings. Probably we'll see what happens with Bradford, but going up against Trubisky, making his debut in Chicago in front of the home fans. They've had some extra time to prepare this game for Trubisky, but can the rookie spark that offense against a pretty good Vikings defense?
I'm one of the few people in the country who thought it was a good idea for Chicago to trade up for Trubisky because I really liked what I saw of him in college. But Minnesota's got a really tough run defense. They've got a really good secondary. I just don't think Chicago's going to have offensive firepower. So it's a bad game for Trubisky to start off with, but I think Minnesota will win that one handily.
All right, there's our look at the Week 5 NFL schedule. KC Joyner, the Cardinals are in town to take on the Eagles. Give us the matchup to watch and who you like in this one.
Well, I've hit all my Eagles games this year. I'm 4-0 on picking them so far. So, knock on wood for Eagles fans, I'm going to correct this week because I just think that the Cardinals' offensive line is so bad that I don't think they can play call their way around it. I think Philadelphia wins by a touchdown.
All right, that's a look at this week's games from KC Joyner here on the Sports Bash. And don't forget, he'll be back on Monday to recap it at 5:05 when the Eagles and Cardinals game is done. We'll be talking about it here on the Monday edition with ESPN.com NFL insider KC Joyner here on 97.3 ESPN. Enjoy the football this week, my friend.
You too. Thanks for that.